Not all spirits linger in graveyards. Some dwell closer, beneath the threshold of your home, beneath the surface of a stream, or deep in the forest where the trees lean in to listen. These spirits do not haunt. They watch. They test. And they judge. Tonight we cross into the realm of unseen boundaries, spaces neither sacred nor profane, but suspended in the in-between. The Slavic world is one rich with folklore, tangled in roots older than memory. Its spirits are not monsters in the Western sense. They are not evil. They are also not good. They are something more dangerous. They are moral mirrors, and what they reflect is not the world around you, but the truth you'd rather not see. Welcome to Hauntings and Happenings. I'm your host, Casey, and in this episode, we'll descend into the mythos of three figures, the Domovoi, the Rusalka, and Baba Yaga, each perched at the edges of society, each cloaked in contradiction. They are spirits of the hearth, the river, and the darkened woods. They dwell in places we consider safe, until we remember that safety is an illusion. But why do we fear them? Why do their stories unsettle us even more than the specter in the attic or the phantom on the stairs? Because their intentions are not clear. Because their judgment is not consistent. Because we don't know what they'll do next. And nothing terrifies the human mind more than the unknown. Psychologists call this ambiguity aversion, our deep-rooted tendency to favor the known over the uncertain. As Peter Waker, Stefan Troutman, and Ferdinand Viter explain in their paper, Causes of Ambiguity Aversion, Known versus Unknown Preferences, we don't just fear bad outcomes. We fear being judged for choosing the unknown, for making the wrong call when no clear answer was offered. That fear of negative evaluation, it lingers, like a whisper from the shadows. And in Slavic folklore, that fear takes shape. It watches us from behind the stove. It floats just beneath the still surface of the lake. It waits in a hut that spins on chicken legs, daring us to knock. These are the watchers at the threshold. And tonight, we knock. You leave a bowl of milk by the stove, a crust of bread on the windowsill, a whisper of thanks as you sweep the hearth, not for your family, not for your gods, but for him, the Domovoi. He is the household spirit of Slavic folklore, not a ghost, not a demon, but something older. A presence of the place, a creature of habit born of firelight and ancestral bone, small, shaggy, bearded, sometimes seen as a miniature double of the homeowner, sometimes appearing as a cat, a dog, or even a snake. The Domovoi is as intimate as your heartbeat and as dangerous as your guilt. According to Steve T. Evans in Slavic folklore, the Domovoi, a spirit of hearth and home, the Domovoi may have originated as a pre-Christian ancestral spirit, a manifestation of the dead watching over the living. In some tales, he was once a fallen being, cast down from the heavens who made peace with humanity and learned to live among them. But peace, in the Domovoi's world, has rules. Every home has its own Domovoi. He may dwell beneath the stove, in the threshold, under the stairs, or out in the barn. And he watches. Always. If the household is clean, the family respectful, and the old ways honored, the Domovoi offers blessings, fertile fields, sleeping children, a hearth that never fails. But disrespect him, neglecting your home, speaking cruelly, or forgetting the offerings, and he will warn you. First with whispers, then with scratches, then with flying dishes and broken glass. He becomes Barabashka, the knocker, and what was once a guardian becomes an agent of chaos. So how do you keep him pleased? Evans outlines specific offerings: salt, porridge, bread, milk, and tobacco, left at night near the stove or threshold. One must never whistle indoors, for it drives away household spirits. Moving into a new home, tradition says you must invite the Domovoi to follow, whispering through the keyhole, "Grandfather Domovoi, come with us to our new home." In Russia, he is revered as a protector. In Ukraine, feared as a judge. In rural Serbia and Bulgaria, tales will circulate of Domovoi who strangle livestock or bring death omens when offended. Some even believe the warmth of his touch can predict fate. Warmth means fortune. Cold means mourning. But even beyond folklore, he embodies something deeply psychological. As Waker, Troutman, and Vider argue in their article, humans don't just fear negative outcomes. We fear being judged for choosing wrongly when the rules aren't clear. The Domovoi lives in that psychological limbo. He is the voice that says, "You should have known better," even when no one told you the rules. He is a spirit, yes, but also a symbol of conscience, of culture, of the ancient fear that maybe the punishment isn't random. Maybe we deserve it. So sweep your hearth, leave your offering, and don't whistle in the dark, because someone might be listening. She waits in the reeds, eyes like water, hair like river grass, and sings the song of sorrow, and dares you to listen. The Rusalka is no simple water spirit. She is a contradiction woven in current, a creature born of beauty and grief. To meet her gaze is to see what society would rather look away from. Feminine rage, unfinished mourning, and desire that refuses to be polite. In the article Rusalka, Mythical Slavic Mermaid and Czech Opera, from Meet the Slavs, the Rusalka is traced back to ancient Slavic pagan beliefs, where she was once a fertility spirit, tied to the earth's cycles and the flowing rivers. She was a bringer of life, of crops, of spring's return. But, over time, particularly with the rise of Christian influence, her myth was rewritten. She became dangerous. She became cursed. She became the cautionary tale. A woman who drowned herself out of heartbreak, a soul denied heaven, a warning against female autonomy, passion, and rebellion. And so, the Rusalka became a spirit of vengeance, of punishment, luring men to the water's edge with her voice, sometimes tickling them to death according to Polish legend, other times dragging them beneath the surface where she had once fallen. But she is more than a monster. She is memory. A memory society tries to submerge of women who died too young, too angry, too inconvenient. In Carl Jung's psychological model, the Rusalka becomes an agent of the shadow, that part of the psyche we repress and disown. According to the article Understanding Carl Jung's Concept of the Shadow often takes the form of what culture most fears in itself. And for patriarchal systems, the fear is often tied to the uncontainable power of the feminine. The Rusalka is our projection of guilt, of fear, of everything we punished, and everything we secretly still want. Her danger is not just in her hands, but in her ambiguity. Is she a victim or a villain? A warning or a wish? The uncertainty gnaws at us because it means we might have created her. And so, each year, Slavic communities observed what became known as Rusalka Week, also called Green Week. During this midsummer period, especially around Kupala night, it was believed that the Rusalki were most active and most dangerous. Water was avoided, rituals of purification were held, fire and water, death and rebirth, all entwined in celebration and fear. The Rusalka was honored or appeased to keep her from returning. We lit fires, we danced, we sang, but underneath it all, we begged forgiveness. Because the Rusalka doesn't just haunt rivers, she haunts memory. She haunts regret. She is not a ghost of death. She is a ghost of consequence. Deep in the forest, far from the warmth of the village, stands a house. It creaks. It groans. It turns. Its chicken legs stretch tall and crooked, scratching at the air. There is no door until you speak the words. And when it lets you in, the bones on the fence rattle a warning. This is the domain of the Baba Yaga. She is the most feared and most misunderstood of Slavic spirits. Witch, crone, cannibal, guardian, oracle, she is all of these things. And none of them. In the article Who is Baba Yaga from Arcane Alchemy, she is described as a paradox wrapped in bone and bark. Sometimes one woman, sometimes three sisters. She rides not a broom but a mortar, steering with a pestle, sweeping away her trail with a broom of silver birch. Her hut stands on bird legs. It spins when summoned. It screams when it moves. She is the ultimate threshold spirit, the keeper of liminal spaces. She does not live in the human world. She does not even belong fully to the other. She is what stands between. And like all liminal figures, she demands something before she allows you to pass. Not a price of coin or blood, but of truth, of courage, of self-awareness. She will test you. According to the World History Encyclopedia article Baba Yaga by Joshua J. Mark, her role in Slavic stories is not to punish wickedness, but to test the character of the soul. She gives impossible tasks. Grind this wheat, cook the stew, sweep the sunless floor, not to torment, but to see how you respond. If you meet the challenge with humility, kindness, and wit, she may grant you powerful gifts. If you whine, demand, or lie, she eats you. Not metaphorically, literally. Baba Yaga embodies the deepest moral ambiguity in Slavic folklore. She doesn't adhere to any clean notion of good or evil. She doesn't explain her rules, and if you need her help, you'll never be sure if you'll leave her hut whole or hollowed out. This, again, is the very essence of ambiguity aversion. As Inside BE explains and why we prefer the known over the unknown, ambiguity aversion leads us to fear choices with undefined outcomes more than risky choices with defined loss. We'd rather lose predictably than confront the unknown. And Baba Yaga? She's the personification of that terror. Unpredictable, powerful, and uncategorized. Yet perhaps what we fear most is not that she might kill us, but that she might see through us. She is also the embodiment of what Carl Jung called the crone aspect of the shadow, a repressed archetype feared for her power and wisdom. In understanding Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, we see how traits we reject, especially in women, like rage, aging, solitude, and autonomy, are projected outward as monstrous. Baba Yaga is terrifying not because she is wicked, but because she is free. Free from social norms, free from gendered expectations, free to live, eat, fly, or help as she chooses. And in that freedom, she becomes terrifying. She challenges us not with violence, but with a mirror. What do you bring into her hut? What will you do when no guidance is given? Who are you when no one is watching, except her? Baba Yaga is the forest's heartbeat. She is chaos with rules no one wrote down. And to find what you seek, you must risk yourself upon her threshold, because the only way out of the woods is through her. Picture this. You're at a fair. There are 2 urns before you. Each holds 100 balls. In urn 1, you're told exactly what's inside. 50 red balls and 50 black. In urn 2, you're only told that there are red and black balls, but not how many of each. You can draw from either urn. If you draw red, you win $100. If you draw black, you get nothing. Now, which urn do you choose? Most people choose the first, the one where the odds are known, even though the second might hold more red balls, or fewer, or none. This is the Ellsberg paradox, a famous psychological experiment from 1961 that revealed one of the most consistent and irrational human behaviors: ambiguity aversion. We don't just fear risk. We fear not knowing what the rules are. In their paper, Waker, Trotman, and Viter explored how people instinctively retreat from uncertain choices, especially when they feel they might be judged for the outcome. If there's a chance we'll be blamed for picking the wrong urn, the ambiguity becomes unbearable. And now, step into folklore. The Domovoi, the Rusalka, the Baba Yaga, they are the urns we cannot see inside. These spirits offer no rule book, no guarantees, no warning. They might reward you or ruin you. They might do nothing or destroy everything. This is ambiguity with consequence, and it strikes the deepest chord of fear. As Inside BE explains in their article, Ambiguity aversion isn't about avoiding danger. It's about avoiding regret. The unknown forces us to guess, and guessing opens the door to blame. We see this not just in ancient myth, but in everyday choices. You stick with the same dish at a restaurant because you don't want to regret trying something new, and you know you already like this thing that you order. You avoid new medication because what if the side effects are worse? Even if that new medicine could help you more than what you're currently taking. We also ignore the detour on our GPS because the highway, though slower, is at least familiar to us. We prefer what we know, even if it's mediocre, over what we don't, even if it could be better. And that's what gives Slavic spirits their power. Their ambiguity isn't just eerie, it's existential. They don't operate within known systems of morality. They don't clearly telegraph their motives, and in doing so, they force us to make decisions we know might be wrong, with no way of knowing why. It's terrifying because it's too real. We don't fear them because they're monsters. We fear them because they are mirrors. And when they ask, "Why did you come here?" the answer is never clear. Only that we did. And now, the choice is ours. Folklore is not fantasy. It's confession, coded, encrypted, passed down through lullabies and warnings, and the monsters we whisper about are often ourselves. These spirits, the Domovoi, the Rusalka, and Baba Yaga, are not just narrative figures. They are reflections. They are what we imagine watches us when we think no one is looking. But here's the question. Why did these specific figures rise out of Slavic folklore? Why these punishments? Why these forms? Carl Jung's theory of the shadow, as outlined in Understanding Carl Jung's Concept of the Shadow, tells us that we project what we most repress. That the traits we are told to bury, anger, sexuality, disobedience, grief, re-emerge in stories as existential threats. But those threats were born in the collective unconscious, which means they carry our society's shame as much as our own. So let's talk about the Domovoi. He enforces domestic order. He rewards harmony and punishes disruption. On the surface, that's quaint, even charming. But dig deeper, and you'll see he mirrors a cultural anxiety, the fear of broken patriarchal control. A man loses his temper, the Domovoi turns cold. A woman speaks too harshly, milk sours. A child disobeys, the hearth grows cold. The Domovoi is a projection of familial surveillance, a spirit who punishes deviation from traditional hierarchy. He is the invisible patriarch, demanding respect not through reason, but through fear. The Rusalka, meanwhile, is society's repressed grief and shame, especially around women's autonomy and pain. In her pre-Christian form, she was a fertility figure. But with Christianization, she was rebranded as a cursed spirit, a woman who died by suicide, often due to heartbreak or sexual sin. She became a specter of consequence, haunting those who betrayed or forgot her. And that's no accident. The Rusalka is the embodiment of a cultural taboo: female rage. She is grief that was ignored until it drowned, She is desire punished into myth. And in making her monstrous, we made ourselves feel safer. And then there is the Baba Yaga. If the Domovoi polices the home, and the Rusalka mourns the loss of belonging, Baba Yaga stands outside all systems. She lives alone. She owns her power. She eats those who cannot pass her test. She is an affront to the cultural script of womanhood. Not maternal, not young, not beautiful, not obedient. And what did we do with her? We turned her into a crone in a nightmare house. Because she breaks every gendered expectation. She doesn't serve. She rules. She doesn't give life, she ends it. She is freedom, and in a culture that fears women who take up space, freedom is terrifying. These spirits weren't born to haunt us. We built them to enforce the lines we dare not cross. And when someone did cross them in life or death, we gave them a myth to live in, so we wouldn't have to look too closely at the truth. Carl Jung once wrote, "What we do not make conscious will return as fate." In Slavic folklore, that fate walks on chicken legs, or hums beneath the river, or waits in the dark corner of your home. It doesn't ask if you're sorry. It asks what you've projected and whether you're finally ready to take it back. They've left the rivers. They've stepped out of the woods. They're no longer just whispered around the fire. And they live in your playlists, your Netflix queue, and your favorite horror games. The Domovoi, Rusalka, and Baba Yaga have not faded. They've evolved. In today's culture, we don't just fear them. We click them. The Rusalka appears in media that channels feminine rage and aquatic mystery. From the mermaid Lake of the Dead to the sorrowful boss battles in games like Castlevania, Order of Ecclesia, and Bravely Default, where she is rendered as a seductive, tragic force. Baba Yaga? She's thriving. She is the inspiration behind the hut on Fowl's legs in pictures at an exhibition. She loomers over Vasya in Catherine Arden's The Bear and the Nightingale. She morphs into a god-tier crone in Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and even appears in John Wick as the folkloric name for a relentless, near mythical force of judgment. In Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, we see elements of the Rusalka myth projected onto a traumatized female protagonist wading through grief and madness. The game never calls her by name, but her essence haunts every watery corridor. The Domovoi's quieter dread, the judgment within the home, shows up in films like Antlers, where a creature rooted in ancestral pain and hidden sins festers in the domestic space, punishing familial neglect. And of course, there's The Witch, a film that doesn't name Baba Yaga directly, but follows her path perfectly. A young woman breaks the rules, resists patriarchal control, and ends up dancing with the darkness in the forest. Not corrupted, but transformed. But why do these figures still resonate? Because we haven't resolved the psychological wounds that birthed them. We've just rebranded them. In modern terms, we now talk about moral injury, a concept from psychology and trauma research. It describes the deep emotional distress people feel when they violate their core ethical beliefs, or when the systems they trusted do. It's not just guilt. It's the rupture of moral identity. These spirits, once myths, now memes, embody that rupture. The Domovoi punishes not actions, but disharmony. The Rusalka doesn't haunt sinners. She embodies the pain they leave behind. Baba Yaga doesn't enforce morality. She questions it and dares us to do the same. We also see what psychologists call symbolic displacement, the process by which repressed feelings or traumas are projected onto unrelated figures or objects. In other words, we take the guilt, shame, rage, or grief we can't face, and we give it a face, a story, a spirit. We name it, we fear it, we share it on TikTok. Because it's easier to fight Baba Yaga than to face ourselves. But folklore has always functioned this way. These aren't just monsters. They are cultural storage devices, keeping our anxieties alive long enough for us to finally understand them. And so, they stay. In the algorithm, in our art, in the questions we still haven't answered. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like something was watching you? Not to harm you, not to scare you, but to see who you really are. Not when the cameras were rolling, not when the stage was lit, but when no one was around, and yet you felt the air shift. Maybe it was the Domovoi crouched in the corner of your kitchen, judging the silence after an argument. Maybe it was the Rusalka whispering from the bath train, reminding you of promises you never kept. Maybe it was Baba Yaga, not judging, not punishing, just waiting, watching, weighing. When you broke a rule, when you crossed a line, who punished you? Was it your parents, your church, your law? Or was it something older? Something that never spoke aloud but still made you feel seen? These spirits don't appear at random. They aren't summoned by superstition or song. They arrive when the rules blur, when we break the fragile contract between what we know we should do and what we actually choose. They appear when we test boundaries, when we redefine them, when we dare to step off the marked path. And in that moment, when ambiguity seeps in, when morality bends, they rise. Because they are the challenge, the test, the reckoning. But not all reckoning is punishment. Not all judgment is cruel. There's beauty in it too, in that sacred uncertainty. Because when you stand at the edge of right and wrong, of good and evil, of known and unknown, that's where growth begins. Ambiguity asks who you are when no one tells you what to do. It dares you to act without guarantees. It becomes accountable not to authority, but to your own soul. These spirits reflect our complexity back to us. They force us to sit with discomfort, contradiction, and moral consequence. They don't ask you to be perfect. They ask you to choose and to face the unknown and walk forward anyway. They were never meant to be heroes. They were never meant to be villains. The Domovoi, the Rusalka, Baba Yaga, these spirits do not fit neatly into tales of good and evil because they are not here to comfort us. They are here to confront us. They are the spirits of the household, the judges of ambiguity, the mirrors we meet when we dare to question the rules, or ourselves. They are not meant to be feared. They are not meant to be feared for what they do, but for what they reveal about our homes, about our guilt, about our hunger for order in a world that only offers shadow. We fear them not because they are cruel, but because their gaze is uncertain. And when we stand before them, we do not know what they see or what they'll do with what they find. Because in the end, what we're most afraid of, it isn't in the forest, or the hearth, or the water. It's what might be waiting there, wearing our reflection. So remember this: when the fire flickers, or the river sings, or the trees whisper your name, maybe it's not a haunting. Maybe it's a reckoning. Thank you for joining us on today's journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this episode of Hauntings and Happenings, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow seekers of the strange. Got a story, theory, or a haunted hotspot you want us to explore? Reach out to us at our email, hauntingsandhappenings@gmail.com, and you might just hear it in a future episode. Remember, the world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and together, we'll keep searching. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, stay spooky, and of course, keep it weird.